everyone. My name is Samantha Neugebauer.
And I'm Katy Gathright.
And this is Short Story Boudoir, where Katy and I discuss one short story, one every episode, and we share some desserts. Today we're going to talk about Tomorrow is Too Far by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This was originally published in 2006, and it comes from her only short story collection, I believe.
Yep.
And which is called The Thing Around Your Neck.
Yeah.
And this is a story about a little girl who goes to Nigeria every summer to stay with her paternal grandmother. The story is told in second person in the you, and it's a retrospective story. So we're getting her as an adult looking back on her childhood summers. And as always, no spoilers. We will have many spoilers.
Yeah, don't come here if you want no spoilers.
Yes, so read the story first. So the story is concerned with the relationship between our unnamed protagonist, her older brother Nonso, and her cousin who lives in Nigeria all the time, Dozie. And on the one particular summer, the older brother dies. He falls out of a tree, and that is kind of the central, tragedy and accident fueling this story as we come to learn that in fact it was our protagonist who not only caused this accident but premeditated it and whatnot. And so this accident causes a lot of fallout for the family, and I think that might be a good place to begin.
Yeah, let's dive in, because I do think the accident is obviously the kind of big thing that's forming the engine of this story. And I'm curious about a couple things to kind of kick us off. I mean, one, I think when you're reading the news that the brother Nonso dies comes on the second page of the story, and it's a pretty short story, so page 2 is like a decent amount in. And that's when you kind of learn why we're circling around this summer, and that reveal was kind of a reveal to me. I was like, oh, okay, news to me, that's intense, that's big, that's what this story is going to revolve around. And then there's a sort of second reveal that happens towards the end of the story when we learn that the reason that her brother died is because he fell off a branch while she was kind of goading and teasing him and kind of willed it to happen, premeditated, like you were saying. So that reveal actually was not a surprise to me. I sort of saw that one coming, and so I'm curious if you felt the same way about those two reveals.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that the reveal and kind of your surprise feel to me bowed up with the idea of having that second person narrator, because it's you constantly, like the protagonist is talking to herself.
Yeah.
It's much different than some of the other stories where we just discussed, where we have a you protagonist who feels like they're wagging their finger at the reader.
Yeah.
You really feel like you're actually witnessing kind of an inter-self dialogue.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
And maybe because of that, you just don't necessarily feel the surprise. Right? Because it's not really a surprise to the self.
You're right. That's not the headspace that she is in.
Absolutely not.
So we're not in that headspace
Yeah.
either.
I do wonder about how the lack of surprise could maybe affect readers who aren't reader writers. I wonder if that would be disappointing in a way that I necessarily didn't find it disappointing as well, because I was like, oh, this actually, how did she do this? How did she create this story? It feels that her secrets are almost rising to the surface a little bit,
sure.
Which feels useful.
Yeah, I agree. I think this story is really well structured. And actually, I was just listening to a podcast recently. Steven Soderbergh was on the New York Times Book Review podcast talking about Adichie's work and how well structured it is and how much you can learn as a writer, director from what she's doing. And I agree. I think it's what's that balance of foreshadowing that's satisfying enough that you feel kind of good about yourself for anticipating that twist, versus maybe being too heavy-handed or not. But I think it walks that line well for me.
I agree. And I think that actually segues into my discussion point, which was that choice of second person, and kind of blend it with the idea that there's a lot of repetition in the beginning of this story and then throughout it. So her protagonist keeps repeating, it was the summer, and then it wasn't the summer. And I was wondering, how those things enhanced the story for you or if they didn't.
Yeah, that's a great point about the repetition. I mean, I do feel like the story really takes care to like establish a voice at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think voice is important to this story because this is a narrator who's clearly reflecting on something like pretty central to her life. But who is not like overly saccharine or like, I don't feel like this is a story about grief. Like it could be a grief story because it's reflecting on her brother's death, but it's not. That's not the tone. And so I think that repetition almost, it puts us in the hands of like a really talented storyteller. Almost like it feels like a story well told as opposed to like processing. Like I think a lot of stories feel like great stories are just a different kind, feel like sort of emotionally processing something. And this is a little bit different, I think.
Yeah, you don't get that sense of processing. And I think when you have stories of processing, which I feel like should be shorthand on this going forward, it's almost like, your story can be like fish shaped or something where, you're kind of like, the rhythm is unpredictable, right? Like I'm thinking of like a very strange extraterrestrial fish.
This is a visual medium.
Exactly. So we're not on a podcast. This is why. So I think that the lack of processing in this could, in the hands of a different writer, make this protagonist feel cold. Make this protagonist feel too far removed, that the perch is off. But I never felt that either in this story. I don't know why.
And I was curious to talk about it with you because I feel like that's something you're on high alert for as a reader. Like I feel like you always sort of sniff out when a story is like, when a narrator is withholding or sort of like not giving us enough interiority. But this feels like a slightly different project, and maybe that's why.
I wonder too if it's just like a protagonist that I end up respecting the voice of so much that that I can't really accuse her of anything, you know? I just read this really interesting Substack from Garth Greenwell where he was talking about like what is style, what is voice, like how do you deepen, your style. And he talked about like voices that are the most compelling are always kind of giving the impression of a whole life, right? Or of a world condensed. And maybe that's just all it takes. Like I definitely felt that way from this, narrator.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And I think, one of my next things I wanted to talk about was the sort of family aspect of it all.
Great.
And I think there are ways that Adichie kind of uses like shorthand or Adichie / the narrator to kind of build that full world that you're talking about. So, that anecdote where she talks about how she was, in love with her cousin, like it was not the summer she fell in love with her cousin, but that happened a few years before, and how they had sort of been like playing with each other's like sexual parts. And it's like this one line about it kind of introducing this taboo subject, but not like dwelled on. And so I feel like that was like, in one sentence, we sort of got like, okay, there's like some stuff here with her cousin. And it sort of deepened the family immediately. But just zooming out to the family stuff in general, I'm curious, like, how important do you feel like the cousin relationship was to this story? Do you feel like this is a story about family? And like, if so, like, what's the most important family relationship in this story?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because we have a retrospective framing where, we have this adult narrator looking back, but then at the end also she goes to Nigeria and is there to, kind of say goodbye to her grandmother who she has learned has passed away. And it's been over 10 years, right, since the accident. And so the cousin meets her there. And what's interesting about that, for starters, is that if you haven't read the story, you just heard me say that sounds like this is a major moment in the story, but for whatever reason, it's really condensed. I think it's like 2 paragraphs maybe. And I felt like I did not feel like that our narrator had like secretly been pining for her cousin her whole life, like, or waiting to re-meet him, right? And I think that's really interesting because you know, in Americana, like Adichie's, I think, most well-known novel, you also have this kind of interplay between like which relationships are the most important, the ones in the States or the ones back home.
Yeah.
And I wonder if this is just an obsession of hers. And that works for me.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, it does work for me too. I think it's like, again, you know, I think when I read stories, sometimes there are things you're like on high alert for.
Right.
And so like first page of the story, I'm like, oh, there's a Nigeria setting, there's an America setting. Like how much is that going to be what the story is about? And I think, you know, it's definitely like a part of the story, but I love that like it's really still character first, and that is like a source of tension, but not what the story is about, you know?
Exactly, and I think it would be dishonest if you saw marketing that said like, you know, how does, you know, some immigrant girl like deal with the ties from...
Right.
But it's not that. Like that is almost just like the foundation we are walking on in this story.
Absolutely, and I love that it's baked in with her parents too. We sort of learn in the beginning like, oh, there's some like tension because her Nigerian father married this sort of like hippie American black woman, and like the grandmother doesn't like
approve.
But it's like not lingered on. It's just sort of like, oh, this is just like a family, and like there are you know, complicated things happening in the background.
It feels really, really full in that way, and the parents like have jobs, and she gives you just enough so you know that like they have a desire, the parents, like related to work, and that's so interesting. So maybe the family thing really comes down to it just feels fleshed out. Like I think, and maybe that's where some of the, like, we talked about the story feeling constructed, but some of the, it's balanced by like naturalism in a way, because the family feels very real and natural and sort of unconstructed. Like it's sort of like everybody is a little bit like wayward and sort of like has these jagged edges in different ways. Which is very exciting. I feel like a film equivalent might be something like The Family Stone, where like when you're first
I love that movie.
It's a great movie, right? If we ever get on Sentimental Garbage,
totally.
one of our ones to talk about.
Carolyn and Donahue are coming for you.
But I feel like when you meet the family in The Family Stone, you know, in the first meeting, they're not a perfect family in that moment either. It's really so much more interesting to meet a family like in media res, which we all are, and then see how those shifts kind of move around and the cracks are already there, start to break further.
Totally. Yes, we love to watch the car crash.
Exactly. Okay, so I think this is my last kind of talk point, which is the title itself. So if you forgot it, which I think we have a couple times, is Tomorrow is Too Far. So what do you think?
Yeah, you know, it's a title that does not give away much, I don't think. And I don't know, I'm a little bit torn on it, to be honest, because I think we were talking a little bit before we started filming about how this feels like a really memorable story. Like it's just a story that kind of stays with you. But the title is not, for me at least. It sort of like keeps coming in and out of my mind. So I guess there's a question about like, I don't know, how much does that matter? And then why she chose this title.
So I have almost no criticisms for this story except for this title. I just feel like for the rest of my life, especially if we weren't putting this on Story Boudoir, like this would be the story about the siblings or the story where the brother dies. Because the title does not signpost anything for me. And we don't even usually talk about titles too much. Yes.
I know. And I feel like it's a sign like you're asking me a question and I'm just asking you a question.
I know,
I don't know like exactly what. I mean, obviously the title comes from like a line, I think, that is said from one of the characters to another, and you know, there's like this sense of like not being able to make it to his tomorrow, etc. But it's interesting. I mean, I think, you know, this is a story that is a little bit playful with what it's about. Again, kind of like taking its time, telling you what happened that summer, and so it feels like a title about, I don't know. I know what you did last summer.
Right, exactly. Tomorrow is too far. Like,
but it's interesting because I really like the title of the collection, The Thing Around Your Neck.
That's good.
But this one is like a little bit out of grasp.
I agree, and I think that, you know, it just ultimately is a missed opportunity, really. Because you could do something interesting, I think, with the title, and
Yeah, you know, there are some titles that almost kind of like misdirect you intentionally. And I wish I could come up with a good example, but something that's interesting and random in this story is that I think it's like in the first paragraph we learn like, oh, this summer happened right before my parents got divorced. But it's like really not a story about like parents getting divorced, even though you think it might be. So I wonder if playing around with that in the title, like this idea of divorce, like could be
something. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Actually, her first paragraph is doing the work of what I want a great title to do. Which is throw you in multiple directions, all of which you're interested in. And I think that after she says that about her parents, she says something like, the last time like we ever visited my grandmother. So equally another point that you're like being misdirected to.
Absolutely. So that's a great tidbit about titles. Try to remember that. Should we talk about our favorite lines?
I think so.
Okay, I'm gonna pull up mine. So before I talk about my favorite like full line, my favorite phrase in the story is, it comes up embedded in a much longer sentence, but the phrase is like the amoral kingdom of my childhood. And I just really like that. Again, like I just really like how much this story is unafraid to have a narrator who like did something bad and like, isn't really redeemed
absolutely
by the end. And so, and I just think like childhood does feel like a kingdom, and I like love stories that allow it to be an amoral kingdom. So that works really well for me. And then the full line I wanted to read out is this: an open moment, a moment you saw the blueness of everything, of life itself, the pure azure of one of your father's paintings, of opportunities, of a sky washed clean by a morning shower. And that's a line that comes when she's describing the exact moment before she basically like teases her brother into falling down off the tree. So like right before she like kills him basically, and describing that with such like beauty, like really tells me as much as I need to know about like the complexity of this like little girl. You know, we think about children being simple or like innocent, and it's anything but that, you know. And I think I almost feel like that line is kind of what helps the story feel like warm, even though it's a little bit at a remove, like the second person, because that's like access, you know. That's like, wow, like that moment was like blue sky, like a clear, beautiful blue sky to you. And so I thought that was really intense.
I think you're right. It's intense, and it also reminds me of like the beginning of the story where we get this very lush description of the grandmother's backyard, like steamy, like a bathroom, and banana leaves are all tangled with the telephone wire. And it brings my mind to that debate that's always kind of rising about like, does paying attention like make you more empathetic? And here we have this protagonist who is just like super detail oriented, like it's just really observing and looking at the world, and what she finds through all this observing is that she is not like cherished as much as her male cousin, and especially by her male like oldest, most important brother. And so it's devastating. So like what happens when you do everything you're supposed to be doing, and like you're adventurous and you're open-minded and you like meeting all these people, and then you like find out this devastating fact. And I mean, this little girl is a murderer. You know, it's wild. Right?
It's pretty cutting.
Okay, so my favorite line is this: but watching Grandmama on the phone, you realize that the first time and for the last time, she and your mother were united, although they did not know it. So this comes, right after that pivotal moment where the brother falls and the grandmother's on the phone talking to the mother about like what should be done with the body and etc. And what I really like about this is how you have kind of two facts given to us, right? So that the protagonist both, for the first time sees her mother and her grandmother like working on the same team, and then also that they were united for the last time. And yet how she phrases it, that they did not know it is implied to the last time, not the first time. And I think that is so cool how she does that. There are 5 like separate clauses in this, and it just really works for me.
That is really cool. And I think it's like another one of those moments where it's like so efficiently like captures this like mother-in-law, like daughter-in-law relationship. And like, yeah, it gives complexity where there doesn't need to be. These two characters like never meet, like they never actually interact. And so like, but that line is so great and helpful because it like allows them to like have tension without ever actually like crossing each other's paths.
Which really goes against a lot of conventional wisdom that's like, get people in a room together, like on the page. Like, people are never in a room together this year. It's wild. But
it's true.
This was a really good story, and I think we both recommend it.
Yeah,
so,
highly recommend it. It's short. It's really tight and really satisfying, and it was fun to talk about with you.
Super fun.
Until
Thank
next
you, everyone.
time.
Ciao.